Every successful television show has what I call treading water episodes, or episodes that are really about exposition and catching up the fans of said television show. And Westworld Season 2, Episode 2, I think fits into that bracket. It's not that it was a bad episode per se. There was still lots of intriguing elements in there, some fine performances, but it was a lot of material that was meant to be kind of connective tissue between a lot of the events that occurred in Season 1 and where we're at right now with Season 2. It certainly didn't have that same explosive impact that we got in the first episode of Season 2. That premiere was pretty strong, and it came out with a lot of action and lots of like, oh my god, what's going to happen next? Well, what happens next is we get a little backstory. We get a little understanding of how William came to kind of understand that this was going to be a good investment for his parent company. Of course, he's going to be marrying the boss's daughter and sort of inheriting all kinds of the fortune and management of the park, and we get a sense of what attracted him to it in the first place. We also kind of see in very clear sort of terms that a lot of the subplots and storylines are taking place at different times in the park's longevity and its history. And we also see that Dolores is sort of coming into her own, and she's got an awareness of what exists outside of the park. And we also get this great scene where Logan is introduced to a bunch of different hosts that are actually hosting a party, and it's a very effective sequence because there's a realization like, oh my god, these robots are so much more advanced than anybody could imagine. And so we get early days in the Westworld universe, and then we get a little bit of some sequences that are sort of taking place in the current timeline of the show. And we also see hosts interacting with each other. I'm trying not to give too much away in my review here, but we also get hosts interacting with each other and seeing that as sophisticated and as sort of aware and awoke as these hosts are, there might also be conflicting interests, and we might see kind of a power struggle starting to erupt between hosts out on the playing field as well, which was intriguing. James Marsden's Teddy is also kind of trying to grapple with all of this information that he is just being, inundated with, because a lot of this stuff is kind of new to him. He isn't as tuned in as Dolores is, and so he's just watching all of this violence and chaos and sort of curtain-revealing elements sort of take place before his eyes, and it's blowing his mind. And it's fun to watch that sequence. It's also fun to see Ed Harris kind of come to terms with the fact that the park is kind of falling apart around him, and the hosts are all sort of going crazy, and he's reunited with a familiar castmate that we've seen in various scenarios in the past episodes of the show. And then he's also introduced to a brand new big surprise cameo sequence in here, a great sort of reveal in the middle of the show where it's like, oh my god, he's in this? And I don't want to spoil that. You should watch it and get that. And that was cool, and certainly I had a smile on my face and I was intrigued, and now I want to see where the third episode is going to take us. At the end of these episodes, they give you next week on Westworld, and that show looks way more exciting than what we got in this episode. Not that this was a bad episode, it just felt like it was a catch-up show. It's like, here we are, here's why the hosts are doing this, here's how much time has taken place, it's going to be a war. We're not quite at the war yet. Let's all just sort of take a breath and figure out why everybody's going crazy. If you had to skip it for whatever reason, you just didn't want to watch this show or you didn't have time for it, you're not going to be really missing too much. But it does connect some plot lines, and it does sort of give you a thread as to why Dolores, had this kind of sort of in her destiny. She was already kind of brought into the fold, into the the awareness that there is more out there beyond the walls and confines of the park. Some fascinating stuff, and also I love any scene with Jeffrey Wright. He's one of my favorite actors. He's terrific in this show. Yeah, it's fun. It's definitely not the best episode of Westworld. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.